Hi, I'm Heidi with Onigo Stamping. Welcome to my craft corner. Today I have 3 cards to share with you that all have the same basic design. It's a 1 card, 3 styles day. We're going to start very simple, and then with each card it gets a little bit more complex. Takes a little more time, not any more difficult though. Before we get started, if you have any questions about stamping or card making, or you need help ordering Stampin' Up! Product, or would like to attend a class or host an event, I'd love to help you out with any of that. Just go ahead and leave me a comment or send me an email. All of the dimensions and more photos of the samples and a link to the supplies that I'm using today can be found on my website, and I've put a link to that in the description to this video. If you liked today's video, please make sure that you like, share, subscribe to my channel, and come back for more videos. All right, Onigo, let's get stamping. Today's cards all use the Heartwarming Hugs Designer Series paper and the Poinsettia Petals stamp set. I love the stamp set. It's actually shown at only 65%, so the stamps and images are actually much larger than this. It has matching dies and it's just gorgeous. It's an absolutely beautiful set. It does have a matching Designer Series paper, but today I wanted to go in a little bit different direction, so I'm going with the Heartwarming Hugs Designer Series paper instead of the Poinsettia, Poinsettia Place Designer Series paper. All right, so let's get started with the first card. Each of these cards are going to use the same basic design. So what I have is I have a piece of Pear Pizzazz cardstock that has been cut to 8.5 by 5.5 and scored at 4.25. We'll just go ahead and fold that in half. And I'm going to use my bone folder to get a nice crease. That's going to be the card base. Then I have a piece of Mossy Meadow that is, let me see, 5 inches by 3.75 inches. I have a piece of the Designer Series paper, the double-sided Designer Series paper. This is 4.75 inch by 3.5. And I have another piece that is 1 inch by 4.75. Then I have a small piece of Mossy Meadow that is 2 3/8 by 1.25, and a piece of Whisper White that is 2 1/8 by 1 inch. Remember, all of these dimensions are going to be available on my website, so you can click on the link after you watch the video and go over there and get all of the specifics. You don't need to worry about writing them down. All we're going to do is we're going to start by adhering these pieces together. So I'm using the Stampin' Seal today. And then I'm just adhering the first piece of Designer Series paper to the piece of Mossy Meadow. And I'm going to adhere the strip along the side. I'm just going to adhere the strip along the side of my card front here. And the pattern's nice because it kind of helps you line it up straight. So just like that. Now I want to add a bit of the white seam binding ribbon, and I hope that I have enough to finish today's projects. I am almost out. But I'm going to start by just wrapping this around the front of my card, and I'm going to tie it in a bow at the top. All right, so I've tied a bow at the top. I'm going to trim off the edge of the ribbon. So there it is, my tied ribbon. And now I want to stamp my greeting. So I have this small piece of Whisper White cardstock. I'm grabbing my Mossy Meadow ink pad, and I have the greeting from the stamp set that says, "Thank you for making this a wonderful season." And I'm just going to ink this up and stamp it right on this piece of Whisper White. Now I'm going to adhere this with dimensionals to the piece of Mossy Meadow. We're going to make this really pop. And I'm going to add a couple of the minis. It's not quite big enough for 2 of the regular size, but it needs more than just 1. So minis to the rescue. add this to the front of the mossy meadow. And now I'm going to add this whole thing. Again with dimensionals. Bring my minis back in. And we're gonna make this look almost like it's a tag on the front of this card, like this card is a package. So take those off. And I'm gonna just adhere this kind of at an angle right up at the top. And now we just are gonna put this on the card base. Remember, the card base is Pear Pizzazz. So I'm going to add my card front to my Pear Pizzazz card base. Quick and easy, just like that. We have our first card done. So that's the first basic card. Now we're going to go ahead and do the next card that is just slightly stepped up from this. So once again, I'm starting with a Pear Pizzazz card base. I'm just going to fold this in half. Use my bone folder to get a nice crisp fold. I've already adhered my pieces of Designer Series paper. This is all from that Heartwarming Hugs package of Designer Series paper. And I've already adhered it to a piece of Real Red cardstock this time. Just like the last time, I want to tie a bow on here. So there's that ribbon. Now for this design, I'm going to stamp the greeting. This time it just says Happy Holidays. And I'm going to stamp it with Real Red on some Whisper White cardstock. Make sure that's inked well. And I'm going to punch this with the I can never remember. Label Me Pretty punch, I think is what it is. Never quite sure what this punch is called. There's a lot that the names are very similar. So I'm just gonna slide this in and try to get it as straight as I can and punch that out. Then I'm gonna take my label punch and I'm going to punch another label out of Pear Pizzazz. The Pear Pizzazz label, I'm going to take my paper snips and I'm cutting the Pear Pizzazz label in half, and then I'm going to adhere it to this label so that the sides just stick out to give it a little bit extra color. And do this on both sides. Just like that. Oops. Let's turn it a little bit. And then this is going to get placed on a piece of Real Red cardstock that is 2.5 inches by 1 3/8 inches. Just like that. And then we're going to add this to our card front, just like we did before. And I meant to show you, so if we had more ribbon, you know what? We're going to grab some red ribbon. We're going to add this with some red ribbon instead. So what you can do is you can actually, this Label Me Pretty punch, it has a small hole in it too. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to mark, I'm going to use a pen. And I'm going to put a small mark right where I want that hole to be. Now I'm going to place this in my label punch, and it's probably hard for you to see, but you can usually find where you put that little mark and then just punch that so you get the hole right where you want it. Now I'm going to take some red ribbon. This is from the Coming Home, all the trimmings. I'm not sure what it is called, but it's with the Coming Home suite of products. And slide that through there. And I'm gonna tie this on the front. So now we got two bows. We have a white bow and a red bow on the front there. And then just to kind of make sure that this stays where I want it to be, I'm gonna go ahead and grab my dimensionals and just put a couple dimensionals on the back. Reach underneath there. Pull off the tabs. And we'll stick this down as well. Quick and easy, just like that. And now this just gets adhered to that same Pear Pizzazz card base like we used before. And there is card number 2, just stepped up ever so slightly. So I'll go ahead and I'll set that one aside as well. Then we're going to move on to card number 3. Card number 3 is a lot more in depth. But once again, I am starting with a Pear Pizzazz card base, just like I did before. So I'll fold this in half. Give it a good crease with my bone folder. Then, just like before, I have some of the Heartwarming Hugs Designer Series paper and another strip that I have put on a card on a piece of Mossy Meadow. So this is just like the first card. And I'm going to grab some more of this red ribbon. And this time, I'm going to wrap it around and just tape it on the back. So, cut a piece that's just long enough. And just gonna take some Scotch tape and tape that down. And we'll run it right around the front, and I'll tape the other side too. Now, I've used the greetings from the Poinsettia Petals stamp set, but I haven't used any of the poinsettias yet. This time I'm actually going to use those poinsettias. So I have a piece of Fluid 100 watercolor paper, and I have my Jet Black Stays On ink pad. And I have 2 of the larger poinsettia images. So I'm going to stamp these on, ink up my stamp and stamp these on the Fluid 100 watercolor paper. Now the Fluid 100 watercolor paper does have a lot of texture to it. So what I have found, hopefully it will work this time, is if you push this down, make sure you push it really well all over and really kind of give it a second for that ink to get in there. But get some good pressure all over and then peel it off and you get a pretty nice image. You could also put this in your Stamparatus, so you could stamp it more than once in order to, make sure that you're really getting really good coverage. Stamp up the smaller, we'll ink up the smaller one, and we're gonna stamp this right next to it. We're gonna be cutting these out, so stamping both of those with the Stays On. And I will clean those with some Stays On cleaner and then again with some water afterwards to make sure they're nice and clean. We're gonna do watercoloring with this, which is why I chose the Stays On. And I have some Real Red ink. And I'm just putting a drop of Real Red ink on a clear block. Then I have the water brushes. And I'm gonna start with the medium water brush. And I'm gonna just get some water in there, and I wanna lay down kind of a base image that's a little bit watery. Or a base coat, base color. That could be even more watery, so I'm just gonna push a little bit more water down. There we go, because I want the first coat to be a little bit lighter, and then we're gonna come in and we're gonna add some more ink and kind of darken it up. With watercolor, the ink really only likes to go where there's water. So where the paper is dry, it doesn't want to go. So this first layer helps us get some water in the petal images where we want it to be. And I'm not worrying too much about getting all the way to the edges. I do kind of like having just a little bit of white. It kind of gives it just a little bit more, a little sketchy feel to it. So now I'm coming in and I'm not using quite as much water. I'm just picking up that red and coming in and going over the veins and down towards the bottom and adding some more color in. And if your paper's real wet, it will start to follow the water. The paper is not super wet this time, so it's not doing it too much. But you can see that's going to get you that shading. So I would do this with all the petals in both of the flowers. But I'm going to stop there. When you want to change color, go ahead and wipe out as much color as you can. And then I have my old cruddy blanket here. And what I do is I will push the water down into the brush, and you want to kind of wipe out the color before you let go. Because when you let go, the water comes back up into the brush. So if it is sitting there in all that ink, what will happen is it will pull the red ink up into your brush, and pretty soon the water in here will be really pink, and then you can get it out. I mean, you have to dump it out and go through it and stuff. It takes some time. So this way, just by pushing it through and then kind of pulling out that color, that really helps. So I let up and then I just keep pushing through more water, and I'm running out of water in this one, so I would just keep doing this. I may have to go to the sink and refill it. You can also take it to the sink and just wash it out. The red, just because this is the way red is, it may stain that tip just a little bit. But I would just keep doing that, or take it to the sink and wash it out until it's done. And then I'm going to use the smaller one, and I have my Bumblebee ink pad. I don't have a re-inker for this, so I'm just going to take my clear block and tap it in the Bumblebee ink. Normally I would make sure the red was really dry before I did this, because like I said, the ink likes to go where the water is. So if my yellow gets into where the red is still wet, it will bleed into the red. But we're just gonna do this to show you. Just gonna color in really quickly those berries in the center in yellow. So I would keep doing that, clean that all up, and eventually what you have is that it will look like something like this. So you have two different poinsettias, and I'm going to cut these out with the dies. So I have my magnetic base and a cutting plate, and then line these up. All right, I've cut the poinsettias out, and now I'm going to add these to my card front. Grab this, set this aside as well. I'm going to go ahead and stamp my greeting. So I have a piece of Whisper white cardstock that is 2 3/8 by 1 1/4, and then I have a piece of Mossy Meadow that I cut using the Stitch So Sweetly dies. And for this one, I am going to stamp. Find my stamp. Where did it go? Here we go. I'm going to stamp the greeting that says, "May magic and wonder bloom this holiday." And I'm going to go back to stamping this with the Mossy Meadow ink. So I'll ink that up well. And it just fits, so hopefully I hit it right. There we go. this eventually is going to go about here, and I just want to lay this down. So this is going to go, you know what, we're actually going to adhere. So this time, normally I do this kind of as the last step, but this time I'm going to go ahead and adhere this to my card base. So we make sure that the poinsettia doesn't stick out too far, because it's going to overlap the sides of the mossy meadow. All right. So add a little bit of adhesive. Towards the center. Just want to make sure that my second poinsettia is going to end up where I need it to be. Yep, okay. Because you need these, oh, you know what? Too far over. It's sticking off the edge. All right. Yep, that will work. All right. Sometimes it's good just to lay things out before you really get them stuck down. With the smaller poinsettia, I'm going to take the petals and I'm holding it towards the bottom, and I'm just going to curl each of those petals up a little bit to give it a little bit extra dimension. Now, before I glue on the second poinsettia, let's adhere our greeting to the mossy meadow. Kind of letting that dry a little bit. The ink was pretty wet and I didn't want to smear it. So hopefully it's all dry now. So we'll adhere that to my tag that I cut out. Just like that. We're going to add a ribbon. What I'm going to do is I have this red ribbon again, and I'm going to tie this in a bow with some kind of long loops. And I'm going to adhere this bow with a little mini glue dot. Just pick that up. Pop that right on top of my poinsettia. And now I'm going to use a Stampin' Dimensional for the center of this poinsettia. And it is going to come in right over top of that bow. So the bow is underneath. And then we just need to add the greeting with a few more Stampin' Dimensionals. Everything has to have Stampin' Dimensionals, doesn't it? Yep, it sure does. Pull those off. And add this to my card front. Just gonna tuck it right up underneath there. There we go. So there is my third card. Let's look at all three of those cards again. So here was the first card that I did. The very simple, and then the slightly stepped up, and then the final, much more stepped up card for you. 3 cards, all using the same basic design, just a little bit more time consuming as we get a little bit, more complicated. Thank you again for joining me today. I hope that you liked those 3 cards as much as I did. Remember, all of the dimensions for today's projects, as well as more photos of the samples and links to the complete supply list, can be found on my website. And the link to my website is in the description to the video. If you liked today's video, make sure that you like it, share it with your friends, subscribe to my channel, and come back and see me for more card making tips and techniques. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.